All right, everybody. The deed is done. Miami deuces. Enjoy Cancun. The Celtics are moving on to the second round. We're going to talk about Celtics Heat series, put a bow on that. Then we're going to look ahead to life without Kristaps Porzingis. We'll take a look at that injury, as well as hit any other NBA playoff topics that we can get to. As always, it's a Thursday live stream. If you're in the building, let's go. Put some comments in. Give us a question. Join the show. Let's get it going. Scream with envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. It is a live stream Thursday, and it's a celebratory live stream Thursday as the Celtics are moving on to the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs after taking care of the Miami Heat in 5 games, 4-1 in resounding fashion. I'm your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today, as he does each and every time, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. What up, my guy?
That's good, bro. I am so happy that we have dispatched the Miami Heat. We can say good riddance to those motherfuckers because I was so sick of watching the Miami Heat play basketball. And yeah, man, I'm just happy. This is very different from the last time we live streamed. I'm just pumped that the Celtics have moved on to the second round. Obviously, the Porzingis injury dampens that a little bit, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get to the Porzingis injury of it all, and we'll talk about that. But fuck the Heat. So glad to be gone with the like Heat. It's here's the thing. I feel
Forget
like
professionalism. Fuck the Heat.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. The Heat are one of those few teams remaining in my adult sports life that have brought up a certain level of passion to me where I'm like, no, I don't care about trying to make this cordial. Fuck that team. Fuck that franchise. A lot of F-bombs early in the podcast today, guys. I do apologize a little bit.
That'll be the last one. We won't swear the rest of the
time. Yeah. I don't know if we won't swear. I won't drop an F-bomb. I'll say that. But it is one of those final teams that just like I think about as a kid, like how much passion there was in Red Sox Yankees. I don't think Heat Celtics is at that level, but you think about the 90 whatever it was, like 97 to 04 Sox Yankees, like, and how intense that was. And like as a kid, it was just like, if I see a Yankees hat, like I feel like I gotta like fight that guy. Like that's it's like when you're watching a Heat game, it's like we have our in one of our group texts where it's just like every time the Celtics were up 15 or 20, it's like it's not enough. Step on their throat. Like I want more each and every time. And here's the thing with this series, Greg, that's really kind of funny, especially looking back on it now that it's officially over. And the Game 5 demons that we've seen at the TD Garden over the last couple seasons did not show their heads in this one, thankfully, is that at the end of the day, the Celtics kind of did what they were always supposed to do in this series, other than Game 2. And Game 2 took a historic shooting night from the Miami Heat. But other than that, they win Game 1 by 20. They win Game 3 by 20. They win Game 4 by 14, but we're up 20-something points for the majority of that game. And then they take care of business last night, 118 to 84, their largest margin of victory throughout the series. And so ultimately, other than one hot shooting night, which understandably, because it was another home loss to the same team that's beaten you on your home court many times, this series played out just how we, for the most part, would have pictured it, or how we would have wanted it to from the very beginning.
Yeah, and Derek White was the MVP of the series, no question. And we talked about in Game 2, I went on my whole little tirade about how Derek White can't have an 11% usage rate in a game. And there was the one game where we just kind of forgot. Yeah, we just forgot Derek White was on the floor on the offensive side of the ball, aside from the fourth quarter when he started stepping up in Game 2. And then he just went off the rest of the series, man. It was so good to see him. I think he set a Celtics record, 13 threes over 2 playoff games. That's the most threes ever over a two-game span for the Celtics. And Derek White was on fire both games, the last 2 games to close them out, dunking on people's heads, just doing whatever he wanted.
Derek White, it was addicted to dunking. I don't know how many dunks he had in the regular season. It wasn't that many. I'll tell you that much. It was not that many. And so, I mean, in game 4, when he had the back, which is basically the same play, like it almost felt like it was a replay.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Derek White, and I think the second one was on Bam, right? Like it wasn't like he was just coasting through. Like Bam was in the play. He's in the screen when Derek White flushes that second one. Derek White was just on another level in this series. And I think we'll talk about when we get to the KP portion of this, how that changes and what that means for different roles for guys on this team. But just living in the moment right now for this Heat series, it's kind of fascinating. The Celtics had 3 guys average over 20 points, and Jason Tatum scored the least of them, right? And so that just shows you a little bit of the versatility of this team. And we know Miami was, shorthanded. They were kind of drawing dead, other than having, the math play out in their favor, and they really needed to get some breaks to go their way. So we're very aware of that. But the demons of the Heat were still there. Eric Spoelstra was still there. And I was reading an article earlier today that Brian Robb put out. And he made a really good point about one of the counters that I want to give Joe Mazzulla credit for. Right, we talk about when it's him versus Spo. Spo's got the edge on every coach, right? That's just where Spo's at in his own tier of coaching. But he had limited resources, but what he did try to do was cut the head off of the snake, which is Jason Tatum, and put Bam Adebayo on him, right? And there were at times early in the series where I forget what the matchup was, but I know you were like, hey, maybe don't go at Bam Adebayo one-on-one. Yeah. Probably not the best strategy. So Spo takes Bam, puts him on Tatum, and then what we see in game 4 and in game 5 is that Jason Tatum is basically, when you think back to Steph Curry at Davidson, when they were like double teaming him and he just kind of hung out and his team was playing 4-on-3. Basically, Tatum kind of hung back for the majority of the beginning of each of these 2 games and let his team go 4-on-4 against the rest of the Heat, which then had no rim protection. And despite not being horrible defenders all around, although obviously Tyler Hero got picked on quite a bit, like there's no one at the level of Bam. And Bam's at his best when he's going to be able to roam around and help. So that was a great counter by Mazzulla of letting the other 4 guys, and Tatum also, credit to him for being cool with like, hey, I don't need basically a single shot in the first quarter. You guys do your thing. And of course, we saw Derek White and Jaylen Brown really expose that over these last 2 games.
Yeah, you mentioned the Celtics going at Tyler Hero, and there's that one great moment on the broadcast last night where Mike Gorman took a shot at Tyler Hero, where he said,
I missed this. What did he say?
Oh, he said Tyler Hero doesn't like Peyton Pritchard because Peyton Pritchard plays hard.
White boy battle. I love it.
And Hero doesn't. So he was just like talking about Tyler Hero just doesn't play hard. And it's true, because anytime you would see, especially Jaylen Brown, anytime he got Tyler Hero on the block, he just like backed him into the paint, did his work early, got position. They threw the ball into Jaylen. He just turned over his left shoulder and finished right through Tyler Hero almost every single time. And to your point, you're talking about Bam Adebayo and how he's the only good defender on the team. Cool, genuine Phil just brought up Jimmy Butler. And that's the thing about Jimmy Butler. He's also their second best defender. Right. So without Jimmy Butler, then it's, we're attacking Duncan Robinson. We're attacking Tyler Hero. We're attacking.
They couldn't play Kevin Love. They needed Kevin Love's offense, but they couldn't play him because of the defensive side of the ball.
Exactly. Terry Rozier is not a great defender, but he's a serviceable defender. They were hoping that
he'll play hard.
Yeah, he'll play hard. They were hoping that Wright would step in and play good defense. Highsmith's a good defender. He's handsy.
Yeah.
And then Jaquez goes out. Jaquez is a decent defender.
Right.
So when Jaquez goes out, then they're starting Wright in the starting lineup. I don't know if he'd started a game all year. And they just
his first playoff start. I don't know if he started a game in regular season, but it was his first playoff start ever.
Well, they only had 5 games in the playoffs, Will. So
yeah. Well, no, I meant in his career, but not just this season. Okay. But yeah, and then the other thing was, they were so desperate for offense. Like Patty Mills was a big factor for the Heat in this series.
Patty Mills was feisty, man. He was feisty. He was out there being a pest.
He's been a champion. Like, dude knows what it takes. So I get why they're throwing him out there. And like I said, they were kind of drawing blank at this point. There's not much that they were going to be able to do. And I think ultimately it's a credit to the Celtics, as after game 2, we weren't all the way freaked out, partially, little bit, just a little PTSD, which makes sense given the opponent. And losing at TD Garden has become too much of an occurrence over the last couple years. But ultimately this team just did they stomped this team, right? Like this is exactly what we wanted to see. I think if game 2 and let's say just game 3 or 4, whichever one, let's just say that had taken place in Miami with the Celtics up 2-0 or up 3-0, I don't even think it would have registered. I think it was simply because it was game 2 in the Garden is where it just drew up all these flags. And I think for the most part, I think collectively, not just us, but collectively, we were mostly reasonable about what happened in that game and then ultimately how this series played out. But I really do think if that game 2 happens in game 3 or 4 with the Heat at home and desperation, they just get hot. It's a blip. No one thinks about it. But the fact that it happened at home made it a little bit different. But ultimately, when you just look at the scope of this series, it's straight domination. And other than obviously the Porzingis injury, didn't really have to, exhaust as much energy from this type of series as what we've seen from a Philly series last year, from a Milwaukee series 2 years ago. I mean, honestly, I would say even the Nets sweep, was that 2 years ago? That might have been more from an energy perspective. Obviously, the health is a concern with KP, but like even that because that was such close games each and every time. We didn't really play any close games in this one. We just dominated other than game 2.
Yeah, and I want to bring up Cool Genuine Phil. Shout out again. Cool Genuine Phil said holding Miami in 3 straight under 90 points, simply impressive defensively. And I think my big thing coming out of game 2 was that the Heat are a good defensive team, despite, all of the stuff we just said about them not having good individual defenders. Spo puts them in positions where they can be successful and hold teams down and really grind them out, right? And the Celtics, after game 2, they just decided, you know what, we're going to be the better defensive team because we have more top end defensive talent and you guys don't have your best player. We're going to completely shut you down. And that was my big thing coming out of game 2 was, well, the Heat have a good defense. They're going to be able to hold the Celtics under a certain amount of points. Like, if they're in the 100 to 110 range, the Heat give themselves a chance, but the Heat just couldn't generate any buckets, man. They really couldn't generate any buckets. And that brings me to Jason Tatum's comment that he made in the post game where he was talking about the mindset shift where, they asked themselves, kind of looked themselves in the mirror type of moment and said, what is the recipe to beat us? Right. And the recipe to beat us is to be the harder playing team, right? And the more physical team. What if we just flip that mindset? What if we are the more physical team? What are teams going to do then? Because we all know we have the most talent, right? And I love hearing that because that's all we've wanted from these guys. It's just like, you guys are super freaking talented. Just play harder than the other team. Like, if we end up playing the New York Knicks, right, don't let Josh Hart get 20 rebounds.
Dude, I've already had nightmares thinking about Josh Hart flying in for 15 to 20 rebounds in a game. But and we've called it out when we see it, right? When it's like, oh, hey, when Jalen and Drew just decide to be like, hey, we're picking you up 3/4 court with your, shaky ball handler. Good luck. Like when you do that to start a game, like that really rocks the other team and you put in that type of effort. And we've always talked about, when this team plays super hard, I think I love when the Celtics are connected defensively. They're switching, like whether it's on the back line, whether it's, the communication piece of it. And this is the thing without KP, and not that KP's bad at it, but this is something Al Horford, I think, really excels at is communicating along that back line. And he has just like, he has that senior voice that goes a long way. And he will hold people accountable on the court when they miss their assignment. And so I do think that's an interesting part of Al being forced to play more. Now they got to be a little bit cautious with this, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. But seeing this defense when it's at their peak and when they're just playing harder, because the offense will come when this team plays hard on defense. The offense comes easy. Right. That's always been one thing that I think is very true is that their offense is actually affected most by how they perform on the defensive end. And that's not necessarily the result, but the process of what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. So, and I think for the most part, this series, even in game 2, when, the Heat got hot, like part of it was game plan and strategy, and the Heat just hit shots, and not all of those shots were as open as I think they were kind of made out to be. Some certainly were. There could have been harder to contest, but once again, that was kind of part of or baked into a little bit of the game plan they had. So overall, Celtics just get it done and get it done emphatically in this series. I'm just gonna read Derek White's stat line again here, just real quick. Derek White, second on the team in points per game, 22.4. He goes,
who led it? Jalen
22.8. So him and Derek basically about the same. Derek White shoots just under 58% from the field, shoots just under 48% from three on just under 9 attempts per game, 90% from the free throw line. And then, of course, his usual 3.6 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 1.5 stocks. Shout out to also, Drew Holiday in here. I think he was 2 point. Let me see. Where's Drew Holiday in here? He was, 2.4 stocks per game. So, even though Drew didn't have the greatest offensive series, Drew's still making an impact, all over the defensive side of the ball in this series. And ultimately, Celtics take it 4-1 on to the second round. And, it's kind of funny. We'll talk about the NBA playoffs at large in the third segment here, Greg. But you look around right now, and who are the teams that are sitting home? Boston closed it out in 5. Nuggets closed it out in 5. Timberwolves sweep. Thunder sweep. This entire NBA season has been a muddle. It's been just so muddled in the middle, right? In the West, there was 3 teams vying for the 1 seed for like 2 months. And in the East, Boston, we've talked about this ad nauseum. They've locked it up 3 months ago, basically being the number 1 seed. Who are the 4 teams that are now resting and everyone else is in a dogfight of a 3-2 series, 2-2, whatever it might be. And it's funny. Sometimes the regular season really kind of reveals itself, and you're seeing it now play out in the postseason with who's getting rest and who's still playing, battling it out to get to that next round.
Right. Yeah. That was why it was so important for the Celtics to take care of business against the Heat as well, so that they can chill, for the next week. The Celtics aren't going to play for like a week, and they can watch the other teams beat themselves up. And this is the position that we'd been in the past, as we would just play these unnecessarily long series. Last year against the Hawks, they went to 6 games, right? Like you can't go to 6 games.
It was that game 5 at home, had the lead, blew it down the stretch.
Can't go to 6 games with the Hawks. You can't go to 6 games with this Heat team. Ultimately, with this series, what we're going to remember is that the Celtics took care of business emphatically, as you said. And I'm happy to move on because we have to talk about life without Kristaps Porzingis, right? That is the biggest thing coming out of this series, is that Kristaps Porzingis got hurt, right? I know that you went live by yourself. Shout out to you for going live by yourself. Or you didn't go live, you just recorded.
I didn't go live, I just recorded.
Shout out to you. Next time, go live. Yeah,
it's scary when you're by yourself.
I wouldn't want to go live by myself. But with Kristaps being hurt, one thing I want to point out first, and this kind of brings it back.
It sounded like for a second you were saying, with Kristaps being horny. I don't know why. You just went hot. That's like,
well, here's what I was going to say, is that Luke Cornett stepped up. So I like the word Cornett kind of snuck in 2 words too soon. You know how that goes sometimes. But Bam couldn't do anything with Luke Cornett in the Celtics the last couple games. Luke was amazing. Bam shot 35%, 5 for 14 with 2 turnovers against Luke Cornett. So without Kristaps Porzingis, to your point earlier, you said that you can't overtax Al Horford. So it's important to end this series early. So Horford, who's going to have to play a lot of minutes in the next series without Porzingis, doesn't have to play unnecessary minutes in this series. But then Cornett stepped in. And Stan Van Gundy, interesting, Stan got a lot of hate after game 4, but I will give Stan one piece of credit for last night. I watched live. I watched the Mike Gorman broadcast because shout out to Mike Gorman, his last game ever called in TD Garden. And today when I was watching the replay, I watched the TNT broadcast, and Stan Van Gundy said about Luke Cornett, he said that Luke Cornett is the 3rd string center on the Boston Celtics, and he would be one of the better backup big men in the league, 2nd string centers. And we've made a lot of progress with Luke and our own perceptions of who Luke can be as a rim protector, especially. But it was really nice to see Luke Cornett get the opportunity to guard Bam Adebayo, because I do think in later rounds in the playoffs, there might be an opportunity for Luke Cornett to have to guard somebody that we didn't expect Luke Cornett to do a good job against. And I don't know, I don't want to name names right now, but I'm thinking of a few names out there where I would love to see Luke get the opportunity, because he is a really good individual defender, and he protects really well, moves his feet really well, and just is 7'2" with long arms. And he's going to do that every day of his life until he dies. He's 7'2" with long arms. So shout out to Luke.
You take that away. So at least in that respect, he replaces KP very well. 7'2", 7'3". It's about as close as you're going to get to replacing from a physical limb standpoint, 7'2" versus 7'3". But so yeah, so with Kristaps Porzingis, it's so the last thing that we know is right now the hot injury in the NBL, the soleus strain. Everyone's trying to catch a soleus strain. Giannis had this. I don't know if it's the same injury that Jamal Murray was kind of dealing with. Even Luke actually said towards the end of the season that's what he thinks that he was dealing with when he missed the last week or two of the regular season and then the first couple games here of this Miami series. So apparently the bug's going around with the soleus strain seems to be what's happening. And I know that right now it's kind of been labeled, as Missoula said, we'll evaluate in a week. To your point, Greg, now that the Celtics have taken care of the Miami Heat, we wait to see what happens with the Cavs Magic. If the Cavs are to put this away on Friday night, Sunday will be game 1 at the Garden. If it goes to a game 7 for the Cavs and Magic, that will be on Sunday. And then game 1 of the next round will be Tuesday at the Garden. So either Sunday or Tuesday will be the next game. And, the latest reports on Kristaps are he'll miss a minimum of several games. I saw another report that was he's not expected for this round. So I think, honestly, if you're a Celtics fan, you have to wrap your head around whether it's Cavs or Magic, we're not seeing KP this series. If we do, that means things are going really well in our favor. But as far as his rehab goes, but I think we have to expect that we're not going to see Kristaps Porzingis in this series. So let me start with this, Greg. I have to admit, mea culpa, I still have not watched much of this Cavs Magic series. Okay. I don't know. Did you have a chance to watch that game 5 at all?
I watched the fourth quarter of the game.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your takeaway from that, because one thing, and also no Jared Allen in that game.
Yeah, I was going to say that was my big takeaway is Jared Allen's hurt.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about either team, because right now I think that series could really go 7, and then who knows what happens in a game 7. But both of these teams are big, so tell me what your thoughts were watching them, knowing that that's one of those two teams is going to be our next opponent.
Yeah, man. So I want to give a shout to our guy Fred. He asked a question in our Discord. He said he thought he'd get to send in the video, but he didn't get the chance. Those of you that are watching right now, if you go ahead and send us a video on our Discord or just on Twitter, we can play the video here. We can upload the file and play the video and then answer that question live. So if you want to see your face on the broadcast here, feel free to send us a video. We'll definitely do that. But Fred's question was, does KP's injury change who you'd prefer we face in the conference semifinals or finals? And I want to stick to your question here about what I saw in that game. Without Jared Allen, long story short, I would rather play the Cavs than the Magic, because I think without KP and if Jared Allen's healthy with Evan Mobley, they have a lot of size for the Celtics. And although it's not physical size, it's just like kind of long, lanky size, it still presents a problem for the Celtics, right? So I would rather play the Cavs without Jared Allen than play the Magic, whose end of game lineup, let me just read this to you, was Jalen Suggs, who's 6'3", 6'4" and a half, shoes without shoes, but very physical defender. They had Wendell Carter Jr., who's 7 feet. They had Franz Wagner, who's 6'10". They had Paolo Banchero, who's 6'10", and they had Jonathan Isaac, who some days looks like he's 7'5", right? So they had,
I'm more concerned about his wingspan. Is probably something that like doubles up his height, basically.
And he has like the mohawk too, which gives him like 3-4 more inches. It just seems like he's that much taller. But he was standing next to Evan Mobley, and he was taller without the mohawk. He was taller than Evan Mobley, who was listed at 7 feet, right? So the size of the Orlando Magic, plus with the physicality that they bring, I don't really want to face them without Porzingis. I thought the Magic games last year were when the Magic really gave us problems, were a big reason why the Celtics decided they needed to upgrade in size and get Kristaps Porzingis. That was one of my big takes coming into the season. If you remember, was I said this was a direct response to the Celtics struggling against size last year. They needed to bring in Porzingis because they're just not big enough with Al Horford playing the 5 against a team like the Magic. Al Horford is 6'9". Right, he would be the 5th tallest guy on the court. That's not good for the Celtics. So I would prefer to play the Cavs. Other things that I saw in that game, let's see, Mobley obviously had that amazing block on.
Did see that
sealed the game. He looked great. He had a couple nice finishes in traffic. Jonathan Isaac was doing a great job covering Donovan Mitchell. Jalen Suggs is a problem. Banchero was a beast in that game.
He's been awesome this play. I think he's had one bad game and Franz stepped up that game. But other than that, Paolo's been I mean, he's having almost, if this series wasn't relegated to NBA TV, he's having an Anthony Edwards level, next step in his game, right? Like the
Yeah,
way that he's playing, dropping 35, 39 points, and he carries such a burden with that offense. And that's one of the
really
reasons
does.
why I'm a little bit torn of like who I'd rather play. Because to every point that you just made, they also have to score the basketball. And we just saw with Miami, when you don't have enough people to create, even if you can hold the Celtics to 100 to 110 points, you still then have to find a way to score the basketball on your own end. And that's where I just don't feel good about the Magic being able to do that. Whereas the Cavs, let me pull up this comment we got here from Birkin, who says, I think we should want the Cavs. Those kids down south are rough riders. Very true. We may not like that. What do you guys think? This is where I'm a little bit torn, because even though the Cavaliers have not been scoring the basketball well in this series, which the Magic, they hang their hat on the defensive end. It's, the Cavs are one of the weirdest teams. It seems like they only play their best basketball when they're injured. And partially it's because their team just might not make sense when they're whole, right? But when they are forced to play with one big or potentially play without two, quasi point guards and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, they can kind of, enhance some of their other attributes. But when you look at the Cleveland side of things, like Donovan Mitchell, who I know is not necessarily 100%, at least from what I'm hearing. I haven't, watched as much of him to be able to say that definitively with my own
He looked
eyes.
pretty good.
Yeah. And he's got a playoff track record that you could throw up against just about anybody, right? Like he's got a really good playoff track record. Forget about last year. But, so if you have Donovan Mitchell, a guy who can go toe to toe and drop 30 to 40 pretty consistently, we've seen it. Maybe Paolo can do that as well. But then you get at least Darius Garland who can shoot the ball. Max Strus, we've seen him get hot in a series. There's just more options offensively for the Cavs, who also have a solid defense. Although if you take away Jared Allen, that becomes a little less sturdy. So it really is, to me, kind of a toss-up as to who the better matchup is, because then you also have to factor in, for both of these teams, Donovan Mitchell's been in a bunch of playoff games. The rest of the Cavs, not really. The Magic, nobody's been in a meaningful playoff series until just right now. So I think some of that does have to factor in. And so it becomes to me, just beat the hell out of each other for 7 games. We'll take whatever's left. That's kind of where
I think that series is going 7. I want to give this question from the Discord is sort of related to what we're talking about right now. So this is from Bobby Flay 2301. He says, who will have the most impact going forward of the 3 bench bigs, Luke, X, or Kada? We already talked a little bit about Cornette and how he played so well with Porzingis being out. But my question to you is, do you see, we know Luke's going to play, right? Regardless, Luke is going to he's going to step in for Cornette. But do you see X or Kada getting any minutes against a Magic team who has that size that we might just need somebody else that's just freaking huge on the court? And Tillman is not tall, but he is a wide dude. And then Kada's the biggest dude on the team.
Yeah, my guess would be first up would be X. Then if for some reason that's not working, they would maybe look to go to Kada. But I would assume it would be X for number one, he has playoff experience playing with the Grizzlies. He has stepped up before when there's been guys that were out, specifically last year with injuries to Adams and Brandon Clark in Memphis. He has some really good numbers that he put up going up against Anthony Davis. And so for him, I think this would be the easiest. He'd be the easiest person to put in on the fly. I think with Kada, while he gives you some of that athletic kind of almost there's a high upside with some of the chaos that he brings to it, right? But there's also a high downside to that as well. Whereas Tillman kind of leaves you steady and can leave you in a place where you can still have the opportunity for your playmakers, the Tatums, the Browns of the world, that they can, and defensively, the Derek Whites, the Drew Holidays that can go make plays. And I think Tillman's the best fit for that. I think it's interesting because I think if it's the Cavs, I might lean Cato if they don't have Jared Allen. If they have Jared Allen, I think it'd be Cato just because I think Jared Allen, number one, he's a really smart player. And number two, he's, that physicality, he'll get Cato in trouble really easy. I think if you have Jared Allen versus Cato, not that they're going to pound the ball to Jared Allen and say, go one-on-one, but Jared Allen's smart enough that he'll find ways to expose Cato, whereas I think Tillman would be able to more physically and mentally kind of, handle that matchup. With the Magic, it's kind of interesting because they're pretty. When you think about Jonathan Isaac being out there, he's so athletic that I don't know. Maybe that one is a little bit more of a Kata matchup. How do you lean with that? I'm not positive on my end.
Yeah, I think Kata doesn't play against the Cavs. Even if Jared Allen's out, I
Mm-hmm.
think that like we can get by in that series with just Luke and Al. I think the only way Kata
Especially if
sees,
there's no Allen. Yeah.
yeah, I think the only way we see Kata is if we're going up against the Magic and we're just getting absolutely pummeled on the glass, and it's just too athletic for Luke. And Luke,
Mm-hmm.
and they're sitting there like, you know what, Tillman's too small, and Luke just isn't ready for this physicality. If we know one thing about Kata, what he brings to the table is he's just sheer physical force and presence, and that's what you might need in a series against the Magic. And this brings me to another question from the Discord from Rob Williams, the Third Fan Club. He said he's also interested in this. And to go a bit further, do you see Joe going smaller or bigger, double big against Cavs Magic? When will playoff Brissy be unleashed? I thought there were moments in the Heat series where we would have to add a spark when we look kind of lazy, right? And I
We said
think
that all season.
Brissett,
We thought that was a series for O'Shea was going to be the Heat series, but obviously it was a different Heat team by the time we got to the
yeah,
playoffs.
I was thinking more if we were going up against Jimmy Butler. But my point with Brissett and Kata is they both bring that like unbridled enthusiasm and athleticism to the court that you need against a team that is almost 7 foot across the board, right? So those are two guys that, Brissett, he's not as good of a player as Josh Hart, but he brings a lot of the same intangibles that Josh Hart brings, just in terms of like his ability to crash the glass, right? Specifically. And he's just such a good athlete. And so is Kata, where I think one of those two guys would probably get an opportunity in the Magic series if the Celtics were just struggling with just the physicality of it, because Jonathan Isaac is going to be all over Jason Tatum, and that's probably going to take Jason Tatum out of that series for a second series in a row. And then you're looking at Jalen Suggs probably covering Jaylen Brown. If they put Franz Wagner on him, we're going to absolutely kill him. But even a guy like Mo Wagner coming off the bench, we saw
who loves playing the Celtics. Get that, from the 3 games he played with us as a chip on his shoulder.
Right, but you remember, I think earlier in the season he killed the Celtics, and then one of the games later in the season we had Kata, right? And we were able to just be a little bit more physical with them. So I do think Kata is the guy that I'm looking at to play in a Magic series just because of their size.
So I want to go to that offensive side of the ball that you just brought up, where if Jonathan Isaac is on Tatum, that's not necessarily a matchup that you want to, with even with as good as Jason Tatum's. I think Jonathan Isaac is going to open a lot of eyes of like, damn, this dude is, he only plays 20 minutes a game. So I know he's been coming back from over 2+ years of injuries. So how long he can be on the court, and obviously offensively what he can provide is going to be a big swing factor in the series. But to your point, if they try to go with that Bam on Tatum route that we talked about, the adjustment that Missoula made, this kind of brings me back to without KP. I brought up a couple games ago about the Drew Holiday offensive effect, and this could come into play, I think, specifically in a Magic series where you're going to need to find areas to take advantage of a team that's pretty stout defensively up and down their rotation, right? And so you look at this last series for Holiday, he was 5th in shots, 7th in points. Not ideal. Shot under 35. He shot 35% from the field, 37% from 3. So not horrible from 3, but had a lot of bunnies that he just missed. And there's playoff Drew, which sometimes from ask Bucks fans, there's a lot of good, but there's sometimes it gets a little bit shaky. And we've been saying that there's going to be a time where Drew Holiday has to step up and be more of a scorer. So now you remove KP, right? So he's no longer the 5th option. He's now at a minimum the 4th option. And we just highlighted what Derek White did in this series. I love Derek White. Derek White's having an amazing season. There's a likely chance that's not repeatable, what he just did in that series with those numbers. Can he still be really good? Absolutely. But is he going to be 22 points on nearly 60% shooting and 50% from 3? Probably not. Like those are insane numbers. Like, there's a good chance.
To be fair, though, when Derek White was on his heater where he was getting all the All-Star talk, those were the numbers he was putting up. Not to that level, but he was on fire for like a month and a half. So 100%. It's not impossible, but I hear your point that Drew, we probably need a little bit more out of Drew Holiday on the offensive side of the ball. He was just so goddamn good on defense against Tyler Hero that entire series. That
he was awesome. And that's why even when I was bringing up his offensive let's call it in, air quotes, woes. I was
Mhm.
like, this doesn't even feel right, but it's like one of the few things that like I'm keeping an
You're
eye
being
on here as
realistic.
we
You're
go
being
forward.
realistic. Yeah, just
Yeah,
like
and then without
Jaylen Brown
KP, it
needs to
does change the dynamics of it as
Jaylen
well.
Brown needs to hit free throws.
Good
Thank
God.
God, bro. He hit
45%. 45%.
he hit 2 free throws in a row in the second half last night, though. So I was really happy
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
a story for another day. I can't handle that right now.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll move on from that. But with Drew, if we play the Cavs, he's going to be really important in that series because he's going to have to take out either Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland. There's not really anybody for him to cover on the Magic.
Yeah.
They're just like, I mean, I guess you could put him on Franz because I think he'd be able to deal
he'll
with
get
the
a crack at
physicality.
Franz.
I think
Probably.
Jalen will take that matchup though. I think Jalen will take Franz out of that series. Gary Harris, like you're gonna waste putting Drew Holiday on for Gary freaking Harris. Like, who's he gonna guard? Are we gonna put him on
Cole Anthony
Paolo?
off the bench, maybe. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's just like they don't have, to your point earlier about which team you'd rather play. Like the Magic don't have any offensive weapons aside from Paolo and Franz. It's really all they have. And then Suggs can get hot from time to time. Mo has the occasional game, but they have Anthony coming off the bench. Like this is who came off their bench. Jonathan Isaac, great defender. Mo Wagner, who's great energy big. Markelle Fultz, who is borderline relevant, irrelevant at this point, right? He still has his moments. Anthony is just a microwave scorer off the bench. He's basically a worse version of Peyton Pritchard.
Yeah.
And then Joe Ingles, right? Like what would have to happen for Joe Ingles to get minutes on the Celtics team?
I mean, you'd have to have a lot of people go down with injuries. Is basically what you're looking at because he's certainly not getting minutes over Sam Hauser, and then it becomes a battle between him and Svi and O'Shea, and of who's getting those next minutes. Like that's probably where Joe Ingles would be on the Celtics team is somewhere between or below O'Shea, Brissett, and Svi Mikhailuk.
Right. So that Magic team, like the more I look at it, I'm just like, they're probably the team that you want to play, but they do grind you to a pulp. And I don't want to deal with that physicality. I would rather take the easier physical matchup for the Celtics because, as we already said, you don't want to put those extra miles on Al Horford. And I think going up against the Magic would be really bad for Al Horford going up against the Magic for 5 to 6 games.
And so back to the, X and Luke question. This is where, Missoula may just have to play both, right? Just for the sake of saving some of the mileage on Al, because we've seen it the last 2 postseasons that by the time we get to the conference finals or the finals, if we are, riding Al Horford in big moments, like eventually it just gets, he wears down a little bit, right? And you're going to need him. And I've said this all year. If you're looking at the Nuggets or even Minnesota right now, the way that they're looking, and I've started to hear people pick Minnesota over the Nuggets. I think Minnesota look great. I think it's a little bit too far for me to pick them over the Nuggets, but I have heard a few people say that on different podcasts recently. But if you're looking at either of those teams, like Al is so important in both of those matchups. You need as fresh of an Al as you can possibly have when you get to that moment. So I think even if Joe just wants it to be, Al and Luke, he may need to sprinkle in some X, or he may need to have Luke get, kind of have a larger share than he necessarily wants, because I don't think, where Al was at in this Heat series, about 25 minutes, that's kind of perfect, to be honest.
That's perfect. Right? You cannot play Al Horford 35 minutes a game.
Exactly. That's kind of where I'm getting to.
Minutes. It's just
however you need to break it up. You gotta find a way to keep Al right around that 25-minute mark.
That's you're going to get the best Al Horford possible if he's playing 25 to 28 minutes a game. And that's what we need. If we want to go up against a Nikola Jokic or a Karl Towns in the finals, like you need Al Horford to be there to guard those guys, right? He's going to be the primary matchup on Jokic. He's going to be the primary matchup on Towns, and he's going to be the guy that we need to defend the better scoring big men in the Western Conference. And I absolutely agree with you, man. Okay.
So let me ask you this before we move on to just kind of looking around the NBA playoffs. So we won't know who we're playing until this weekend. So whether we record the next podcast on Sunday or Monday morning, we'll know who the Celtics opponent is. And so we'll have a little bit more insight as to what those specific matchups look like. But looking at the Cavs or Magic, knowing that we're not going to have KP, What is your expectation for that series? Any concerns for the Celtics not being able to pull this off, or how long do you think that these series will likely go?
The more I think about it, I don't see either series going beyond 6 games. I think there's a world we've seen Donovan Mitchell go bananas against the Celtics,
Yep.
so there's a world in which he carries, they're really good at home. They're
He's
undefeated.
probably the biggest difference maker for me between when I'm looking at Cavs or Magic.
Mhm.
And Paolo's getting there, but he doesn't have any help. Whereas Mitchell can go nuts, and like you still have the potential of Darius Garland being able to give more support. Mobley, Allen, they're more consistent than the guys
Yeah.
around what Paolo has in Orlando.
I think the Magic series lasts a shorter amount of time, so it's probably over in 5 games, but I
Mhm.
think it's a more physical series than the Cavs
Right.
series even in more games, right? I think the
Right.
toll over 5 games would be more than the toll over 6 games against the Cavs. I just don't see them as a very physical team. Like, they're bigs. Jared Allen can be physical, but he can also be bullied, as we saw in the playoffs last year, where he wasn't ready for the Knicks' physicality, right?
Yeah.
But the Celtics don't have anybody like Mitchell Robinson, though. So
Yeah. So I'm with you. I think it's about 5 or 6 games for either team. So we'll see. We'll see if X-Man gets some run. We'll see where Luke Cornett falls into place. Greg, let's just look around the NBA playoffs here. We've already kind of done that, interjecting here about how right now there's 3 teams out west that have been at the top all year. They're sitting home waiting. We'll see what happens with Clippers Mavs, as the Mavs now lead that 3-2. And then out east, we're waiting for, we just talked a bunch about the Cavs Magic, so don't really need to get into that. But the Bucks hanging on for dear life. I know as we're recording this is in advance of their game 6 against the Pacers. Dame and Giannis supposedly trying to give it a go. We'll see what ends up happening there. They were able to stave off elimination with Middleton having a throwback game. Middleton's actually been really good in the series. Middleton having a throwback game. Bobby Portis, Brooke Lopez, kind of the the old stereotypical heart of a champion thing, can be eliminated at home, all that type of stuff. Team the Pacers that's super young, minus Siakam, no real playoff experience, still trying to close it out. And then, of course, you have the battle of all battles in this first round, the Knicks Sixers, which has just been an absolute roller coaster ride. What thoughts do you want to give? You can start with the Knicks Sixers. You can talk about Bucks Pacers. Which one do you have any thoughts on?
I do feel bad for Knicks fans after that game, man. But that was get back for game 2 because they didn't deserve to win game 2.
Right.
So I think that series is where it should be. I think it should be 3-2 Knicks at this point. It's going back to Philly, and Michael Rubin bought all the secondary market tickets, so there's not going to be as many Knicks
I
fans.
kind of respect the move, man. I kind of respect. I want to see I want to see how it plays out. But like, I respect it from the standpoint that who knows? Like, first of all,
But how do you know?
if I were a billionaire, what's up?
How do you know that they're a Knicks fan?
What do you mean? Like who you're giving the tickets to?
Yeah. How do you know that they're a Heat fan?
I mean, supposedly they're going to give it a first responder. So I mean, it is still Philadelphia. Philadelphia is similar to Boston. Like think about all the cops and firefighters. Most
Yeah,
of them are going to be
that's true.
Celtics
That's
fans
true.
in Boston. So I think that's kind of where they're hedging their bets. But I respect it from the standpoint, if I were to be a billionaire, this is the type of dumb shit that I would spend my money on. Is like, hold on, I'm single-handedly not going to let this happen. That a bunch of Knicks fans come into the TD Garden. I'm buying, I don't know what those 2,000 tickets cost. Probably, several, 10, 20, $30,000, $40,000. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing with my money. And then I'm
That's a
giving them away
dinner
to
for
make
that
sure.
guy.
That's what?
That's a dinner for that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is nothing for him. So this is the type of shit that I would do, which is why I respect. I'm like, all right, I get. And every time I've heard Michael Rubin talk, I do kind of like. I kind of like Michael Rubin. I'm like, I get his mentality. He's like, he's one of us, one of us, one of us. So I do respect it. It'll be interesting to see. I'm very, because I was shocked at how many Knicks fans took over the Philadelphia arena during game 3 and 4, specifically game 4. Like that was startling to see. And listen, Celtics fans, if you're out there, I know you can make a lot of money in the secondary market. Hit us up. We'll help you sell them on Twitter. We will retweet. We will try to make connections. We cannot let that happen. We cannot let that happen at TD Garden if we end up playing the Knicks in a conference finals. Just can't happen.
Breaking news: Giannis Antetokounmpo is out for Game 6.
Any update on Dame, or he's probably out? I mean, to be honest, Giannis is the one that's going to make a bigger difference because I think Dame's mostly going to be a decoy. But
No update on Dame yet, but yeah, you've always tweeted out. Oh no, Lillard is in. So Lillard's
Lillard's
playing.
in.
Yep.
Okay.
So that
Okay,
gives
we got
that
Lillard
gives,
in,
I would like
Giannis out.
I would like to see the Bucks get through to round 2 just so that they can beat the shit out of whoever comes out of the Sixers in Knicks series, right? Like I want that to be another bar fight. So hopefully that goes to at least a game 7 because I think whoever wins the Sixers Knicks series probably beats the Pacers handily, but I don't know. I've been underestimating the Pacers all season.
Yeah, same. So we'll have to see. I mean, Indiana plays hard. It's just the defense. They're one or two guys away from being truly threatening, and Tyrese Halliburton was looking like he might be getting a little bit closer back to the top 15, 20 guy he was earlier in the season. I think he just recently tweaked his back.
People have been making excuses for Halliburton for the past 2 months. I'm sick of it, man. Play better.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Embiid thing. You're out there, man. So just play better. Like that's, if you're going to be out there, you're going to be held accountable.
He's not limping around like Embiid. He looks like the same guy. He just looks like he has a mental block. Like,
dude, do you think? Remember, like early in the season, how freely he was firing away from deep, catch and shoot, off the dribble. He was basically doing, stuff Steph Curry does with a Shawn Marion shot. Like it was incredible. It was like, this doesn't make any sense. This does not compute. And now you see him, he's very, very tentative with almost every move that he's making, especially when it comes from shooting the ball. So we'll see how those play out. But any other general NBA thoughts you got here, Greg?
And Edwards is beast. Excited to see the Mavs
Nuggets,
take Clippers.
Nuggets and T-Wolves. Give me all of that series. Do you have an initial prediction for that series? I'm curious.
Dude, people are talking about the Nuggets. And people I've heard talking about the Nuggets and like looking at last year when they played them in the playoffs as like an expectation of what to occur this year. McDaniels didn't play last year, and Naz Reid didn't play last year. Two of their best players. So like,
Cat had just come back from injury, I think, like right before that.
Dude, Cat looks good, man. He looks like he lost weight. He's like thinned out.
The biggest thing with Cat is
what
is he's acknowledged that Ant's the dude. That's the biggest thing with Cat is that, and that was one of my biggest concerns for the Wolves is that, Ant might be that guy, but there's from everything I've seen out of Cat up until just about now, and this is like recent. Like you think back to remember that 60-point game he had? We came on here and eviscerated him for getting benched.
Yeah.
Right. Like that Cat has not been what's present in these playoffs. Right. It's been a Cat really that knows good. He's been good. He still makes some really, really dumbass fouls, but he's been better.
I've gone from hating Karl Anthony Towns and the way that he plays to hating Joel Embiid for all the same reasons. I know Embiid is hurt and I don't want to pile on him too much because he's dealing with a lot. Like he's clearly in a lot of pain with his knee. He can't blink one of his eyes. So I'm sure his eye is just like completely desiccated and dried out. So like
blurry, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, man. Like I feel bad for him, but I also just, even if he's not hurt, he's always fucking making excuses for shit. And like, I hate how he foul baits. I hate most of the decisions that he makes. There are like plays where he's clearly completely exhausted because he's never in shape. And he'll throw a dumb pass. And it's like, that's a pass that Karl Towns threw last year. And like, now I'm just kind of starting to see more similarities between them. But like, Towns is getting better and Embiid's getting worse, but Embiid's hurt, so I'm trying not to pile on too much, but I'm still piling on. But
he's also been playing dirty as hell in the series, and that's
right, dude. I've lost.
That's not cool either way,
dude. I don't like Embiid, but Karl Towns to me this is the most impressive I've ever seen him play. I'm very impressed with him, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Who do you think wins that series?
T-Wolves.
So you're on the T-Wolves too.
Dude, Ant's really good. And I'm telling you, the biggest difference with that team, McDaniels and Reed being there and the size that they have, where they like the Nuggets are normally the bigger team with any team that they play. And that's not the case against the T-Wolves. And there's a world in which Jamal Murray gets completely taken out of this series by Jaden McDaniels. And if that happens to the Nuggets, they're fucked.
Yeah, and he's dealing with a calf injury too, right? So he's not going to be, or
But at the end of the day, am I picking Jokic or Gobert? Like Gobert's gonna be
Right.
covering Jokic. Jokic's gonna eat his lunch every single possession. So
I mean, one of the things for me
I'm out
is
on a
like,
limb. I'm out on a limb saying the T-Wolves.
I mean, honestly, I think you're going to start not to be. It feels like a trendy pick. I heard
Okay.
Russillo do it. I think I heard Loeb do it. I think maybe someone else. Like I've heard like multiple people start to
All
pick
right.
the T-Wolves,
I
maybe just
respect those
KOC.
guys.
But for me, I'm just like, listen, if the T-Wolves had home court, like this is where I think
That's
once
a
again
good
I
point.
talked earlier about
That's a
the
good
regular season playing out now in the postseason, like that last game of the season when they could have snatched home court away. You think about Game 7 in Denver, and we know people have talked about it all the time. Like that makes a big difference. That altitude, especially after you're playing a long series like that, and the way Denver plays at home. I'm still gonna lean on the team that's been there, done that, has a legit not just our fans are here. They have a physical advantage that their bodies are regulated for the altitude. Like they
Right.
have an actual home court advantage. And the fact that the Wolves didn't have to play too many close games against the in the Sun series. I still have a couple of questions, even though Ant actually they did play some obviously, and Ant just took over, like in certain parts of that series. But I have a few questions to see if they can hold up in crunch time the way the Nuggets do. It's kind of similar to how I feel about the Celtics against the Nuggets. Is like, yeah, for 45 minutes we can go toe to toe. So those last 3 minutes, you got to beat them in those last 3 minutes to prove that you're going to be better than them.
Will I eat my words talking about Karl-Anthony Towns having taken a step forward when he's probably going to be covered by Aaron Gordon this round? And it's going to be really hard because KCP will probably get the Edwards matchup. And I think KCP is one of the most underrated defenders in the entire league.
Him and Peyton Watson will probably trade off on trying to give Ant as much trouble as they can.
So we'll see if Karl Towns really has stepped forward going up against Aaron Gordon, or if he was just going up against nobody for the Suns.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fascinating match. I can't wait for that series. That series will be awesome, but we'll see. We got some first round series that are going to play themselves out here over the weekend. For us, we will be recording probably either Sunday or Monday. Will probably depend a little bit about what happens in this Cavs Magic series so that we can start to give you a preview of round 2. As I said, that series will begin either on Sunday at the TD Garden if the Cavs close it out in Game 6. Otherwise, it will be Tuesday versus whoever wins Game 7 in that series. So a lot to look forward to. We'll be obviously keeping an eye on that soleus strain for Kristaps Porzingis to see what that looks like. Greg, any final thoughts before we sign off here on the stream?
No, I had some stories that I was going to share, but I actually have people visiting right now, so I got to get back to the party. I'll share the stories the next time we record.
All right. Well, there's a lot to look forward to. So make sure that you guys are tuning in the next time we come at you here with a podcast, with a live stream. As always, make sure that you guys are following us on all of our social medias. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube page. And we'll be back again Thursdays. We're going to keep doing this all throughout the postseason. Thursday live streams. Get your questions in the Discord. We'll answer them live, or just join us live. Join us live.
Send us the videos. I want the videos.
Greg wants a video. Greg wants some videos. Greg wants some home videos. So make sure you guys, if you do have a question, record it, send it in. Guaranteed way to get your question answered. We'll make sure to get you guys on the pod. You get a little FaceTime here on the YouTube channel. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. Celtics moving on. Round 2 coming up here in a couple of days. We'll be back at you. Enjoy your weekend, and we will catch you guys later. Peace.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating your river. I call to see if you open, you know I hope you deliver. Every time you're getting closer.